Hi, everyone. I'm Nataly Kelly, and I appreciate the amazing welcome that Steve gave me. But one thing I wanted to add about my background is that I'm actually a translator by background, translator and interpreter for Spanish, which I think is one of the most important parts of my identity and what I want to discuss today. So, yes, hear it for the linguists. Yeah. Okay, so the title of this talk is Speed, Scale, and Quality, and how can customization and AI help us achieve all three? So, first I want to talk a little bit about the things that we share. So what do we all have in common in this room? We have quite a few things in common. One, we are helping our organizations expand globally into new markets. Two, we care deeply about local customers, local players, local users, local people who are engaging with the organization that we work at. And three, we're all here because we are engaged with DeepL in some way, shape, or form. So, we have a lot of things in common. What are the key questions I'm going to answer in this talk? First of all, speed, scale, and quality. Why is this mix so hard to come by? Why is it so elusive and difficult to obtain? Second, how can AI and customization help? We've been hearing a lot about that today from all of our amazing speakers. And third, how can we use this to unlock more of what makes us uniquely human? So a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm going to do my best. So let's start out with this. This is the elusive trifecta. These are the three things that are really hard to get together. So the joke in localization has always been, you want speed, you want scale, you want quality? Pick two. Can't have all three. Not possible to have all three. So, how do you achieve all three? Well, it's really difficult because quality is the essential piece. Quality is a non-negotiable for anyone who is working in localization. But if you move too fast, what happens? Quality's at risk. Things could get, mistakes are made. That's why it's really difficult when you have to go fast. But as you scale, the complexity increases. Move into more countries, move into more languages, complexity explodes. So, this is where human involvement is actually essential, to make sure that we can balance all three of those things together and make sure that we are inserting human intelligence in the loop where we need it the most. Why is that so difficult? Well, every brand has a unique voice. You've heard other speakers talk about this today. And every company has different priorities. So my priority at HubSpot might not be the same as the next company that's expanding into new markets. And every market has very different needs. And this is a really important piece. Many companies want to go into multiple markets at a time, forgetting that every market has slightly different needs and nuances, not just language needs, cultural needs, economic needs, and all of those factors. And then you bring culture into it. And then you get into all these other different nuances. Why is this so difficult? Because it creates a lot of human burden. If you really want to adapt all of these things and keep all of these things in balance, it creates a lot of human work. What's interesting about the things up on this slide is that all of these four things are beyond language. So you can solve for language, but how do you solve for all of these things on top of language? So customization is actually required so that you can solve for all the pieces beyond just language. Now, Steve mentioned in my intro that I joined HubSpot in 2015, and one of my team members is actually here. So Tomi, where are you? Oh, there she is, right there. So when I had the pleasure of joining HubSpot to build a localization engine for the company to go global, we were at about 170 million in revenue, so still relatively small, but we were already a public company. So we behaved like a startup, but we were trying to be a scale-up. By the time I left, we had grown to 1.7 billion in 2023. Now, another important point, when I started, 20% of our revenue was international. By the time I left, it was almost 50%. So international was growing at hyper speed. About halfway into my journey at HubSpot, one of my localization specialists for German told me about something called DeepL. We were one of the early adopters of the API. I heard it was launched in 2018. I think we were shortly followed after that. We were users of DeepL very early. And I got very excited about DeepL because the quality was incredible. And my German localization specialist was a snob in terms of quality. He was not going to allow anything past us that did not meet the quality bar. So the fact that he endorsed it made me feel very confident. When I tested it for Spanish, I was also pretty impressed. So DeepL was a big part of the powerful tech stack that I needed to build while I was at HubSpot to enable that quality, speed, and scale. It gave us power and potential that enabled us to scale and go global really quickly. But what I learned very quickly was that that was not enough. Technology itself is not enough. As great as the technology may be, and DeepL was the best we could find for the purposes that we needed, I had a lot of work to do internally to change the way people thought about going global. I needed to find a better way of thinking. But I had this hope that if I could get people to think differently, and I had amazing technology like DeepL to help me, that maybe we could achieve this elusive mix of quality, speed, and scale. Could I get all three? Well, we're about to find out. So to change people's thinking, I did what any language nerd would do, created a framework. So we began to really think about how to prioritize different workflows and create different workflows based on the needs of our stakeholders. Now, every content type had a slightly different need. Because marketing content, you need to make sure that you're prioritizing quality, but at HubSpot, scale was really important because we had an inbound marketing motion. I needed to get dozens of blog posts localized every week in multiple languages. So quality and scale were really important. User interface content also, we can't take a risk with that. We're shipping code thousands of times per day. How are we going to make sure that every line, every string, every command, every action that they can take, that they can click on, every little drop-down menu, how do we make sure that's all perfect? Can't take any risks there. Support content. Often, who here has technical documentation that you're using DeepL for? Probably a lot of you, I'm guessing. So support content, technical documentation. This is when people need help. A lot of people say, tech docs, we'll just, not as important to have quality. Yes, scale and speed were important, but so is quality, because when people need help is when your brand can really show up for them the most. So that's also very important. Training content, legal content, billing content. I actually found that my finance team was one of the most underserved stakeholders in the entire organization because nobody thought about those email communications. When we took a look at them, we realized, they're all written with an American mindset, very transactional. We're gonna charge you more if you don't pay us on time, that kind of wording. Not appropriate for Japan. Not appropriate for most markets, actually. So the point I'm trying to make here is that all your different stakeholders internally at a company will have different things that they value. And so having a framework to determine which workflows you need is how you begin that customization process, which is so, so very important. Now, when you think about customized workflows, when we were launching anything at HubSpot, because we had a very heavy content marketing approach, we were looking at a single product launch. We would have 20 different languages in the UI and the support content, but maybe 5 languages for marketing content. Well, guess what? Not all my marketers wanted to launch things at the same time. So that means maybe something has changed by the time this marketer wants it, maybe another. So you can't necessarily always do a global launch in the sequence that you might think. Product launch assets, we had a lot of them because we were very, very into digital marketing. And then the file types. And then my favorite of all, the dependent assets. I'll give you a quick story about dependent assets. So at HubSpot, we were going to launch an important change to our partner program. A lot of agency partners that resell our software around the world. And I got a frantic call from one of my localization project managers saying, the partner marketing team wants to get this email localized by Friday. And I said, well, it's just an email. Surely we should be able to localize it by Friday, right? So we took a look at the email. There was a video in the email, and there were a lot of links in the emails. So we click on the links. Here's your download guide to the new partner program. Here's all the new pricing, of course, in US dollars. Here are all these different things that are related to this email, all those dependent assets. So they needed this for Japan, and I called up the person in charge of the program and I said, okay, we designed the content for the US market. How many partners do we have in the US market? Oh, thousands. How many partners do we have in Japan? 5? Okay, so maybe our general manager in Japan could invite them into the office in Tokyo and we tell them about the changes in Japanese directly? That's actually more appropriate for that market anyway. So a big part of my job at HubSpot was trying to figure out how to change the mindset up front to prevent waste later on and to actually prevent types of communication that might not have even been the best. So I often call these types of projects mission impossible because the home market team will get months and months and sometimes years to create a program, to create a launch, to create a big initiative. My team, can we get 10 languages in 3 weeks? It was always that way. So it was always mission impossible. We luckily had DeepL to help us with a lot of the content, but we had a lot of other things that we had to do too. Now, what I realized was that I couldn't do this alone. I was going to need to engage other stakeholders at the company to get them to realize that global was not just my job or my team's job, it was actually everyone's job. We couldn't do it alone, it really needed to be a company-wide effort. Now, this would require something that my team was not necessarily originally skilled at because we were behind monitors, looking at file formats, doing all these workflows, doing all these amazing things, mostly in front of a screen. But we needed to get out and build relationships with the people inside the company because that was where we could influence their thinking and get greater productivity for everyone. So this led me to think about where do my very valuable humans on the localization team matter the most? They matter the most when it comes to strategy and relationships, hearts and minds. Winning hearts and minds is where AI necessarily could not help me. Technology, automation couldn't help me as much. Building those relationships was the foundation to enable better thinking up front. So I had what I call the ultimate marketing challenge to come up with one-word definitions for very complex processes. So we did come up with these and we evangelized them internally and we tried to get folks to understand that we weren't all about localization, we're about adapting experiences. It's not just about translation, it's about adapting the message or the meaning. It's not just can you redevelop and redeploy this software to add these currencies and all that. It's got to internationalize, got to adapt the code to make that happen. And when it comes to globalization, it was about adapting the framework underneath it all. I was in charge of international operations and strategy, so I also launched offices around the world for HubSpot while running the localization team. International expansion, easy to measure. Dollars that come from other countries. That was highly visible, highly understood, and easy for me to get people to rally around. Translation, also kind of visible. People know when something's not in their language. Localization, however, not as easy to explain. People often will run away when you start to talk about it. Internationalization, even less understood. Globalization, very buried, very deep, very underwater, hard for people to understand. So one of the challenges I had was to make this a mantra, global first. How do we get people to think globally from day one? Multi-market mindset from the beginning. This was a challenge, because even though this became a meme internally and a mantra for people, including our executive team, people started to use it wrong. So they would say, we did this in a very global first way. We rolled it out to the other markets and told them how to do it. Well, that's not exactly multi-market mindset. That's imposing an American mindset on every other country. So we had some education to do. And this is a framework that I have in one of my books that I used to help people understand how you can look at things to figure out, is it really global? Are we geo-agnostic, or is it designed just around our home market? Are we linguistically inclusive? Have we thought about different language needs from the start? Are we operationalized? Have we actually thought through the process and how we will get the work done? Are we balanced, especially in terms of funding and resources? Because that was a big challenge I found. A lot of times, everybody wants to do everything in every country. Those teams don't have the same headcount. They don't have the same budgets. How are we going to make this a success globally? And then the most important one for me was empathetic. Are we actually thinking about local customers? Have we talked to them? Have we talked to local employees? Do we actually know how they feel about this? Do we need to do it? So these are some of the principles that I developed for that purpose. Now, another factor here is the recency of global in the life of your business. So if you're a company that has had a multi-market mindset from the beginning, it's easier to go global. Those are the global native companies, which are few and far between. Because almost all of us, when we create a company, start with our local market biases, even if we don't realize they're there. So companies that go global later, they incur a lot of globalization debt. It's like tech debt. It scales along with you. So one of the things that was really important for me to get to the bottom of when working with teams inside the company was to really focus on the why. Why are we even trying to go global? What is the point? What's the purpose? And as I did this work, certain themes came up. Diversity, inclusion. But for me, it was always more than that. It was about building a globally equitable organization. What that means is that people might not have an identical experience with your brand or with your company or with your employer brand or with anybody that they engage with at your company, but it needs to give them similar value in every country. So giving them similar value and giving them a great experience no matter what country they're from and no matter what language they speak. That's what this concept is of global equity. It goes beyond localization. It's actually at the heart of why we are doing the work that we're doing. So I mentioned that I tried to avoid using the word localization because people would often react in fear. They don't like the word localization. I tried to focus on the things that actually matter for the people, the audience that I was working with, common marketing technique. So I would ask and taught my team to ask, what are the goals of the team that you're working with? It's usually going to be something like adding more customers, driving more revenue, some other growth-related goal. Notice it's not reducing costs. If you start to see localization in this entire area of work as a cost center, things can really go south. It always has to be linked to the higher level ambitions of a company. So I think this is one of the reasons that it's so hard to get that mix right of quality, speed, and scale. You have to get everyone aligned on the goals. So I believe that AI and customization can help us achieve that by addressing the things that humans don't love to do and freeing up time for humans to do more of what we're meant to do. I mentioned winning hearts and minds. That's a big part of it. I think that's going to help us unlock much more human potential so that we don't have to go around explaining what localization is. We can talk about adapting experiences, adapting messages, adapting code, adapting mindsets. We can focus on why we're doing it, not as localization leaders, as global business leaders. I want to say, for any of you who have localization in your title, that I think the localization professionals in this room can run circles around many business leaders. I really do. The reason I say that is not only because I've become a C-level executive myself, and I was a localization person by background, but I also think it's because we have a deeper calling. We came into this field to bridge gaps between human beings. We are in this to actually build relationships and unblock the things that stand in the way of connecting businesses and organizations with their consumers, their stakeholders, their employees. That's a pretty powerful mission. So with that, I want to say thanks to all of you for being here and for choosing this vital work. I really believe it's more than a calling. For me, it's a passion. And I think it's very important work that all of us are doing to bridge those gaps, not just language gaps, cultural gaps, human-to-human communication gaps. You know, this work really requires us to look at the microscope level as well as zoom out to the horizon. That's why, you know, there's a telescope and a microscope. I always use that example because you have to think big picture strategy and down in the weeds. You know, we have to care about the forest and the trees and every little leaf. That's what makes localization a really compelling area to work in my opinion, because that's what it takes to get to the heart of unblocking communication. So, to summarize here, I think the work that you're all doing is complex, strategic, and nuanced, but that's precisely why it's such a rewarding area to work in. So, back to my triangle and my trifecta. This work really does require the very best of intelligence combined. So it does require the best of human intelligence, it requires the best of artificial intelligence, and at the very top, I think the highest level of intelligence is cultural intelligence. And I do believe that at the end of the day, we can get all three. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. And I wouldn't be a marketer if I didn't have a call to action in my presentation. So I have a weekly newsletter called Making Global Work, where I share a lot of these types of frameworks and concepts and information to help people in your shoes. And as Steve mentioned, I have quite a few books. This one that just came out in June is about building a global brand. The one before that is about expanding internationally. And the one before that is a celebration of translators and the important work that they do in society. So with that, I would love to say thank you for having me. Thank you to Deepal. Thanks to all of you for being part of this profession. And it was lovely to be here today. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.